Thank you everyone so much for joining us today for ATARC's Quantum Speaker Series. I'm Elizabeth Wyckoff, ATARC's Working Group Program Manager, joined by our Quantum Working Group Chairs, Allison Schwartz, Lily Chen, and Terrell France. We're so excited to have Dylan Presman speaking to the group today. Mr. Presman serves as the Director for Budget and Assessment in the National Office of the National Cyber Director, ONCD, and responsible for budget oversight and assessment across the federal enterprise. Dylan has worked for the US government for 20 plus years and served under 5 presidents, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden, at 3 different federal departments, US Department of Justice, US Department of Education, and US Department of Homeland Security, as well as having worked for the US Senate. Prior to joining ONCD, Dylan served as budget director of CISA within the US Department of Homeland Security, where he oversaw the formulation and execution of the agency's $2.5 billion budget. So Dylan will get started in just a moment, but we'd like to save our questions for the end of the talk. So if anyone has any comments, questions that they'd like to ask Dylan, please raise your hand or put the notes in the chat. So with that, Dylan, thank you very much, and we'll turn it over to you.
Well, thanks a lot, Elizabeth. I appreciate that. And thank you for having me here today to talk about quantum and the government's role in quantum. As you know, there's a lot of talk about quantum at the moment, and some of it's hype, some of it's scaremongering, and some of it's just plain confusing. So this presentation will spend a little bit of time on what quantum is, and why we care about quantum, and then we'll really focus on how the federal government is involved in quantum and what are the immediate next steps for federal agencies. And the picture you see up on the screen is the front cover of this month's Time magazine. That's just an example of this kind of sense that quantum computings are very much in the news at the moment. So what the hell is quantum? Quantum, okay, at its base, we kind of remember from our days back in college that quantum is the science of the smallest things known to humanity. They're the parts that make up atoms, protons, and electrons. And these quantum particles act in ways that are totally contrary to our usual understanding of the world. So for one example of that is that quantum particles can be in more than one state at a time. They can be in more than one place at a time. And that's not how we understand the physical world at all, is it, right? So you know how classical computers work, right? They're binary. They're all about zeros and ones, yes and no's. And they can answer that yes, no question so quickly. They can go yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, so quickly that they can get really complex actions. They can do really complex tasks using that formula. But quantum particles, of course, are not just yes and no. Quantum particles can be yes and no at the same time. In fact, they can be yes, no, and everything in between at the same time. And so the technologies that will be developed off this quantum science, and that quality, by the way, that quality is called superposition. And that quantum is what's going to make quantum computers and other quantum technologies so powerful, because they'll be able to deal very well with uncertainty in a way that current computers just don't do very well. Classic computers don't do very well with uncertainty. Quantum computers will excel in areas like medical diagnosis, chemical reactions, financial market predictions, and really complex mathematical problems. And then the second quality of quantum particles that's just flat out weird, and in fact Einstein called this particular quality spooky physics, is called entanglement. We call it entanglement. So when 2 quantum particles interact, they become entangled. And now once those 2 particles are entangled, they create a system, and they will forever act in response to each other. So if you turn one of the particles one way, the other will turn the other way. They will always act in that system. And the amazing thing about quantum entanglement, quantum particles, once they're entangled, that they will act as a system if they're sitting right next to each other, but they will always also act as a system if they're really far apart. So for example, if one particle is here and the other particle is in France, if you turn one of the particles, the other particle will turn in mirror through time and space, which is hence why Einstein called it spooky. Because they don't know that they're not together. They don't know that they're 2 particles, and they act as if they are immediately contiguous, but in spite of time and distance. So these two qualities and other qualities about particles, but quantum particles, but these two qualities in particular are what are going to make quantum technologies really different from the current types of technologies that we have. And there are three areas where quantum technologies are really beginning to emerge. Quantum computing, I talked about that a minute ago, and I will talk about that. So I'm going to leave that aside for the moment. But the other two, which I won't really be focusing, I just want to touch on so you kind of have a sense that it's more than just quantum computing. Quantum communication leverages the sensitivities of the quantum systems to ensure extremely secure transfer of information. And so if you imagine using that quality of quantum entanglement to transfer data from one of those quantum particles to the other, that data would transfer. One can imagine that data transferring instantaneously without any opportunity for intervening. So that makes it incredibly secure. And China is really heavily invested in quantum communications in particular. And then the third technology, quantum sensing, leverages the quantum phenomena to measure physical properties, including like navigation, typing, detection. Quantum sensing, actually, crude forms of quantum sensing is already in use, especially in like mining, oil production, those sorts of industries are already using quantum sensing, and they have been for some time. But when quantum sensing gets to its full potential, it will really revolutionize things like what we currently use sonar for, radar, those sorts of technologies, as well as timekeeping and other sorts of areas like that. But what I really want to talk about is going to focus on the quantum computing, because that's where this spooky science of quantum interacts with cybersecurity. Quantum computing and the other technologies I just talked about are going to revolutionize industry and culture, and are going to be an amazing open up amazing opportunities for us. They're going to be the same level of revolutionary as the computer revolution was back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so there's a really lot to be extremely excited about. But there are some dark sides to this, and the federal government in particular and industry needs to be thinking about that dark side. It doesn't overshadow the great opportunities that quantum represents, but it is something we need to think about now, because we've known since 1994 that in 1994, a guy called Peter Shaw created an algorithm that, once implemented on a sufficiently mature quantum computer, will allow that quantum computer to break the most commonly used encryption algorithms for our computer internet lifestyle. So what's called RSA and Diffie-Hellman, these are two very, very commonly used cryptological algorithms and systems that quantum computers, once mature enough, will be able to break very easily. Now, back in the 1990s, when Shaw's algorithm was developed, that was just a theoretical threat, an interesting intellectual exercise. But with the speed of technological breakthrough over the past few years, the threat is now an inevitability. It's no longer just a dream that people are chasing. It's now just an engineering challenge to be overcome. There's a table on this slide, and I don't know if you can see it, given that it's kind of small, but it basically is the Global Risk Institute asked quantum experts when they thought quantum computers would be sufficiently mature to break RSA encryption and implement Shaw's algorithm. And you can see from this table, the preponderance of experts think it's like 20 or 30 years away. There's very few experts think it's in the next 5 or 10 years, but most of them are clustered around the 20 and 30 years. So it looks like quantum computers will be mature enough in 20 to 30 years. But so then you're saying, well, why should we worry about it now? The quantum computers aren't going to even exist that can break RSA encryption till 20 years. We can leave this a decade or two to start thinking about it. But it's not just about when quantum computers will be ready. It's about the shelf life of data. And what I mean by that is, excuse me. What I mean by the shelf life of data is that sensitive data has significant timelines. So if you think about classified data, it often has a 25-year classification period, or even a 50-year classification period. If you think about medical data, well, we want to keep that secure for the lifespan of the patient. If you think about the name of an informer in law enforcement, again, that needs to be kept safe for the lifetime of the individual involved. You think about intellectual property. Sometimes intellectual property also has lifetimes. To be perfectly clear, that time is already running short on putting in place systems to secure our classical computers. We know that foreign adversaries plan and are currently collecting encrypting data from public and private entities, with plans to decrypt it later when they have access to a sufficiently developed quantum computer. So what's called harvest now, decrypt later is the technique which our adversaries use to steal encrypted data and hold it potentially for decades, with the expectation that eventually they will have a quantum computer that will make decryption possible. So it isn't the end of that life cycle of data that we need the security. We need that security at the beginning of the life cycle of that data. And given, like I said, data can have very long life cycles. It's now that we need to be putting in place the security for our classical computers, for our regular computers, so that data that is sent across, financial data, medical data, classified data that's sent across our systems is secure, so that we're not leaving it in the hands of our adversaries. Let's imagine something has a 50-year life cycle and significantly mature quantum computers are available 25 years from now. Would have 25 years to play with that data, and that would have significant impacts on our security. So the administration has taken a very strong stand on transitioning our computer systems and networks to quantum safe cryptography. The administration issued what's called NSM 10, National Security Memorandum 10, and that talks about both sides of the quantum issue. So it talks about the incredible opportunities that quantum will offer once there are sufficiently mature computers and other technologies, and then it also talks about the threat vector and what to do about that threat. And then there's two other pieces of policy that I just want to mention. NSM 8 is a sort of parallel to NSM 10. NSM 8 speaks to the classified systems within federal government, and the Quantum Computing Cybersecurity Preparedness Act, which passed late last year, codifies NSM 10 and NSM 8 into law. So when people talk about NSM 10, you can kind of hear the voice of all these three pieces of policy. So NSM 10 and NSM 8 lays out the roles and responsibilities of different federal agencies and organizations in this arena. The Office of Science and Technology Policy has a lead role for quantum for the entire federal government, and they have established their quantum initiative office, and that is focusing heavily on the opportunities that quantum offers, research and development agenda, and so on. It also focuses on the post-quantum cryptographic issue, but their primary focus really is on the opportunities. The NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, has the responsibility to develop that quantum safe encryption systems, and they are well underway of working on that issue. They actually started back in 2016. They issued a call for organizations to develop quantum resistant algorithms. Last year, they identified 4 algorithmic systems that they're putting forward as potentially the standards that will be developed into these standards for post-quantum cryptography or quantum resistant cryptography. And they are working to standardize those algorithms and are on track to have their standards available by the end of this calendar year. NSA is responsible for all the classified systems within federal government, and they are responsible for transitioning those to post-quantum cryptography, and they are well on the way to doing that. The Office of Management and Budget and my office, the Office of the National Cyber Director, have the responsibility in the federal government for the transition, for overseeing the transition of departments and agencies. And I'll talk a little bit in a moment about sort of the individual steps that entails. Obviously, federal departments and agencies have responsibility to transition their own systems. And then the sort of last piece of the puzzle, CISA, which has responsibilities in a lot of these areas. Actually, this is something I should have said. It's not like the Office of Science and Technology Policy is on their own, or NIST or NSA. You know, obviously, each of these entities has responsibilities in a lot of the different areas. I'm just talking about the lead. And so CISA has the lead for working with critical infrastructure sectors on the transition to post-quantum cryptography. And they have been out in the field meeting and meeting. They've had, I think, something like 300 meetings so far on the issue of post-quantum cryptography and transitioning critical infrastructure sectors and across the board to those new standards. So what you see before you is the sort of roadmap. Like, what can we do now? The roadmap to quantum safe. Because we know that upgrading networks and systems to quantum resistant algorithm in order to meet the threat will take significant time and money. This is not something that is routine. Transitioning cryptographic systems doesn't happen very often. I know that there's a lot of information on this slide, but it basically can be broken down into 3 steps. And why I put this up there is like, what do we need to do now? What's the first thing we need to do now? Because in a year's time, NIST will come out with the new standards. And that kind of seems like a long time, like it's not even happening for another year. We don't have to worry about it now. But there's a lot of stuff that needs to take place before those standards are in place. So that's what I want to focus on right now, is what are the concrete steps that departments, agencies, organizations need to be doing in the before time to get ready. And the first step is sort of obvious. It's know what you have. And like I said, that sort of seems obvious. Yeah, we know what we have. But in the case of big, complex organizations like federal departments or agencies, like multinational organizations, multinational businesses, it's reasonable to guess that only a very small fraction of them have a comprehensive inventory of cryptographic systems that underpin their business operations. I would hazard a guess that that's not commonly something that people can get their hands on. Like, what cryptographic systems do we have within our business operations? Organizations are going to need to have an inventory of 1, the data, the critical data that's moving across their systems; 2, the cryptographic systems that they use, the cryptographic tools that they're using; and finally, cost estimate for transitioning, because you're going to need to, departments and agencies and business organizations are going to need to budget for this transition. So that's the first step, is developing that inventory, and that is going to be a heavy lift for all involved. There's no question about it. There are automated tools available, or being either available or being developed. And the sort of usual suspects in the business services world are readying themselves for that. And obviously, I'm not going to name names because that's not my role. But that will be a major undertaking for organizations, both within the federal government and across industry. And what we expect is that we're going to find sort of three kinds of systems within our networks. We're going to find sort of commercially available software, like your Microsoft, your Adobe, and so on and so forth. And in that case, it's reasonable to expect that those vendors, those businesses will be updating their own cryptographic systems. So that is not the piece of the puzzle that's going to be really difficult within the federal government. The second type of software and hardware that we anticipate finding have cryptographic systems are sort of the government customized systems. Sometimes we call it GOTS, government off the shelf, which means those, it's often the case where the government will take, or businesses will take a software, but customize it for their own uses. And that will take a little bit more work, obviously. The first category, I talk about the Microsofts and the Adobes, they're going to be doing that for themselves. In terms of government customized systems, there will be some work involved, and there will need to be contracts put in place for that transition to actually be executed. And then the third kind of big overarching class of system or software hardware we're expecting to be identified are those systems, legacy systems that are old or were never built for the cryptographic systems to be transitioned, to be switched out. You can imagine there are systems out there where the cryptography is hardwired into the firmware or the actual system itself, or where the technology is just so outdated that there isn't space within the memory cards, for example, for these new cryptographic algorithms. Where those systems are that's really going to be where the heavy lift takes place. That's where we expect to find a lot of the major issues, and those will take significant effort for transitioning. So, like I said, the first step down the road is the inventory, to inventory what is in your departments and agencies, organizations, and businesses. The second step is to prioritize those. Frankly, we're not going to get everything done at once. And so it will be critical that we identify the most sensitive systems, the most important and the highest priority for transition. And then obviously the third step is to develop a plan for systems transition once the new post-quantum cryptographic systems and standards are in place. Transitions plans should consider creating cryptographic agility in the future to facilitate these adjustments, because this won't be the last time we need to transition out of one form of cryptography or another. As I mentioned earlier, NIST has been charged with developing the quantum resistant cryptographic systems and have been making a lot of progress in that way. And by the end of 2024, we expect to see, by the end of 2023, beginning of 2024, we expect to see those standards coming out. And that will be the beginning of the transition process. So specifically in terms of implementation for the federal government, departments and agencies, the next steps, I want to just finish off by talking about the next steps. So the first next step, which really isn't a next step, that's kind of a misnomer there, but November the 18th, OMB issued a memo 2302 providing departments and agencies with guidance on how to implement NSM 10. Today, the Office of National Cyber Director released guidance and templates to federal departments and agencies on the inventorying of cryptographic systems. And departments or agencies are responsible for submitting to the administration prioritized entries of cryptographic systems by May 4th. They'll be submitted via CISA's Cyberscope system. Departments and agencies are used to using that system for submitting data on cybersecurity type data, IT type data to the administration. So that's how they're coming in. And then by June 3rd, all departments or agencies are responsible for submitting cost estimates for the transition to post-quantum cryptography to the administration. And then finally, ONCD will issue a report in October on the migration plans for the entire federal government, including cost estimates. And so that's what I wanted to talk about. It leaves a few minutes for questions if there are any from the floor. Elizabeth.
Yes, we have a question from Kate. She's asking, will quantum be included in ONCD's national cyber strategy?
Yes, we do expect thank you. Great question. Some of you may be aware the Office of National Cyber Director is currently drafting a national cybersecurity strategy that is expected to be released shortly, and it will take a strong stand on quantum, especially on the transition to post-quantum cryptography. Both from this is going to have amazing transformational qualities for our society and offers amazing opportunities, but also we do need to take these steps to secure ourselves from adversaries.
All right. The next question is from Christopher. Actually, Christopher and Marvin, or Colette rather. They'd like to know if we can get a copy of the slides.
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. I will distribute those.
It's finished.
And then Douglas asked, where is China ahead of the USA in the quantum arena?
So China is heavily invested in quantum. There's no question about it. They see amazing. They see the amazing opportunities, and they're very, very interested in quantum communications, which I touched on a little earlier. But they're also heavily invested in quantum technologies, in all of the other quantums, and in quantum computing. Are they ahead of America? It's hard to know. The Chinese academics have published a significant amount in material on quantum technologies, and the quality of that material is sometimes challenging. So they have invested a lot. They have acknowledged up to as much as $15 billion direct investment. Of course, it's not really apples to apples comparison talking about dollars in the Chinese system and in the American system, because of course a lot of the investment in the American system is through private entities like Google and IBM and other major multinational organizations that are heavily invested in quantum. Whereas in the Chinese economy there aren't those sorts of private investments. It's public investments. But China is, it is safe to say China is extremely interested in, and if they get a quantum computer before us, that could be a challenge for us.
All right, well, with less than a minute left, I think we need to wrap it up at this point, but thank you so much to everyone for joining us. We will make the slides available to all. And thank you again, Dylan, so much for a wonderful presentation. And this will be posted to ATARC's website, and we will make sure to email everyone a copy as well or a copy of the link to view it as soon as it's been posted. So thank you again.
Thank you.